Now to this,
I'm
and
really,
follow along.
I need some water or something.
You're going to
I'm
need
sorry,
some. A member of President Trump's Foreign Policy Advisory Committee said he told several Trump campaign officials, including members of the president's inner circle, that he was heading to Moscow in July of 2016. Carter Page testified before the House Intelligence Committee last week, and in an exchange with Republican Congressman Trey Gowdy, Page said that he emailed former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, current White House Communications Director Hope Hicks, and campaign foreign policy advisor J.D. Gordon that he was on his way there. Page also said that he told Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
Again, here's another Russian contact that Jeff Sessions allegedly knew about.
And campaign co-chair Sam Clovis before he left.
By the way, yeah, you know, Gordon told him don't do it. And he went around to figure out a way to get to Russia.
Page said that Corey Lewandowski told him he could go, but the trip was not affiliated with the campaign. Lewandowski told USA Today in March that he did not say Page should travel to Russia on his own, though he also said he couldn't remember. But, quote, I'm very clear about this. I granted nobody permission to do that. Page had not provided the emails to the House Intelligence Committee when he testified on Thursday, but said that he would. The testimony also contradicted Page's earlier comment that he only exchanged greetings with Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Dvorkovich. In an email sent after the trip, Page wrote that Dvorkovich had, quote, expressed strong support for Mr. Trump and a desire to work together toward devising better solutions in response to a vast range of current international problems. Furthermore, just shortly after returning, Page congratulated members of the Trump foreign policy team on July 14th, 2016 for their, quote, excellent work on the Ukraine amendment, a reference to the Trump campaign's decision to intervene to water down a proposed amendment to the GOP's Ukraine platform. Page told the committee he was, quote, just expressing what I feel.
Let's just stop right there. David Ignatius, despite the fact that Carter Page is all over the place, and many times people are looking at his testimony as performance art. There are lines out of that testimony that are so damning that actually start to stitch together what was happening. And when he goes over there and actually has official meetings with the Russians that I think the Attorney General knew about and others knew about, and then they go to that Ukraine amendment. People are starting to suggest perhaps a quid pro quo. You give us dirt on Hillary, we'll remove the Ukraine amendment from the GOP platform.
It was bizarre testimony. He sounded as if he was making it up as he went along. One minute he was invoking the Fifth, another minute he wasn't. Documents kept emerging that he hadn't told the committee about. Oh, I'm happy to give you those emails. And when you add this up, you see now 3 separate instances in which Trump campaign associates, Papadopoulos,
right,
in his plea agreement, Page now in his descriptions of meeting with the professor, the famous July 9 meeting with Don Trump Jr., in which the Russian lawyer appears. In each of those 3 instances, the issue is what are the Russians going to do to help the Trump campaign? And the evidence now is coming from them. And you begin to see something really hard. This has been a difficult investigation with so many things in the air. Those are the hard pieces because they show the Russians working directly to supply information to the Trump campaign that will be helpful.
And Willie, the Trump campaign actively seeking contacts with and help from Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin.
And again, you wonder, when Jeff Sessions testifies before Congress 3 times that he was not aware of any Russian contacts, and he clearly was told about this meeting by Carter Page and others that we've learned about since, did he think it wasn't going to come out? Did he think somehow people weren't going to get to the bottom of it, whether it was in the journalists investigating it or inside one of those committees looking into it? How could he sit up there and say, knowing what he knew,
right,
that he didn't know of any Russian contacts in the campaign? Even if they were innocuous, why would you say you didn't know anything when you clearly knew that you'd been talked to about all this?
And what about Donald Trump and Mike Pence and Jeff Sessions saying that nobody on their campaign
Right.
talked to Russians. As Mike Pence said, we just talked to Americans.
Right.
No, they talked to Russians. They talked to
Right.
Russians a lot, and then they've spent the last 9 months lying
Yeah.
about all of their contacts with Russians.
So, Casey, you poured through these pages and pages of testimony, almost 7 hours of Carter Page, spilling it in front of the House Intel Committee. An interesting note to President Trump, the idea would be, from Carter Page's point of view, for President Trump to go to Russia and make a grand speech that he said would have been like President Obama going to Germany in 2008, that would have launched his campaign and his presidency on the world. What else jumped out at you as you look through this testimony?
Willie, I think what you were just referring to earlier is kind of the key overarching question here. Obviously, we're learning new information about what top Trump officials knew about Russian contacts between people who were working for them inside the organization and Russians. The question, I think, is whether there was intentionality or actual discussions, or whether this was a situation where they were kind of accidentally running around with people who had deep Russian ties. What I took away from this transcript is, Carter Page, this wasn't just a one-off, oh, hey, I took a trip to Moscow. He had long-standing, deep business ties with people in Russia. If you dig down into the details of this transcript, a very odd picture of this man emerges. And he is somebody who went from, at the beginning of these investigations, my sources were describing him as essentially falling all over himself to tell them everything they knew. It was almost as though they felt that they were receiving his resume in the mail. Then more information about this Steele dossier came out, including an allegation that he met with a top Russian businessman during this trip, had a secret meeting. That still hasn't been corroborated in this transcript, but now the committee was pressing him on, where are you living at night? He insisted, well, I'm not living or sleeping at a Russian's house, but they redacted that information. How are you making your money? He says, well, I have passive investments. I haven't been working. I'm living on my savings. Well, where did that money come from? Did it come from Russia? There are so many unanswered questions in this transcript. It also gave us a very interesting window into what this committee is looking into, the questions they're asking, that I think are going to yield a lot more reporting in the press over the next few weeks.
David, if you look at testimony before the committee, if you look at all the testimony so far, that the information Bob Mueller's getting, the information that we're just getting, that's just dribbling out, Mueller knows so much more. There are all these contacts that first they denied, and then they said were incidental contacts. Now it's and now it's very clear there is a pattern, and it is an expansive pattern, and time again, these key members have lied about their contacts, including the President of the United States, who drafted up a statement on Air Force One while his lawyers were stranded on the ground. That was a grand lie that may have involved one of the most important meetings.
What we're seeing, I think, is the way in which Russian tradecraft works. Somebody's initially contacted by a professor, somebody that they would get to know in their normal course of business. That's what Papadopoulos says. That's what Carter Page says. And then that professor is able to introduce them to this senior official. Page first said, well, I wasn't meeting anybody more than just the ordinary person on the street. Well, it turned out that he was meeting the deputy Russian prime minister, and that he was passing back to the campaign the words from this very senior Russian official about how Russia wanted to work with the new team. So you see how they were building their relationship with a lot of anticipation that things would be different with Trump. We now see, long after, how a prosecutor builds his case. How he starts with these little people. Who'd ever heard of George Papadopoulos before? Carter Page,
and what
for
was
that
he
matter.
doing there?
But you build these structures of influence brick by brick, board by board, and it gets bigger. And that's what we're watching the prosecutors explain to us. And eventually it leads up to the senior people. But we're not there yet. That's why this is such a good investigation.
And you've got to go back and you've got to look at points in time if you really want to understand how far we've gotten, how far down the road we've moved, Mika. That if you go back, for instance, to the Washington Post editorial board meeting that Donald Trump had, where he spoke about the size of his hands
Right.
for a great deal of the time. When the Washington Post finally got him to talk about foreign policy, the first two people he named were Carter Page and Papadopoulos. The first, those, so go back, and by the way, that wasn't in June of 2015. That was after the guy was on his way to winning the Republican nomination. What was that? I think that was in May or June.
It was, yeah, it was late
who
spring. It was
gave
clear
him
he was
that
going to
list?
win.
It
And
was-
he was only then getting this list together of people nobody had ever heard of.
And those were his first two people, and they already had contacts with Russia.
We're going to go back in time and look at the other people that former presidents have named as the top of their
And by
foreign
the way,
policy team, the
those
first
two,
people.
By the time he
Who were they?
gave those two names to the Washington Post,
Yeah.
they had already met with Russian agents.
That's incredible. Still ahead on Morning Joe.
And still ahead, Mika,
Yes.
he would hire another foreign agent named Paul Manafort. That was in the summer of 2016.
It's
Before
kind of
that,
incredible,
Michael
and
Flynn.
that's what we know.
Yeah, before that, he was flying around the country
With Flynn.
With Michael
Who
Flynn.
makes them psychologically feel calm. Okay. So you just saw a member of the Senate
He would
Intelligence
sing
Committee,
lullabies to
Senator
them in
Angus
Russian.
King, and
Calm them
Congressman
down.
Jim Himes, a member of the House Intel Committee, which questioned Carter Page. And David Ignatius is going to tell us what is going on in Saudi
What is
Arabia.
going on in
Please
Saudi
explain.
Nothing
Just ahead.
happening here, folks.
No.
Move along.
Nothing
along.
to see. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.